7 years ago, at the bottom of the NBA was, no, not the processing Sixers. The Milwaukee Bucks, a 15-67 ball club with one of the worst records in league history. So bad that just one Buck reached the 1,000-point threshold on the year. So here the Bucks find themselves in the draft lottery. All three teams, and I mean each and every single one of these franchises, have their livelihoods at stake. The Cavs had a 1.7% chance of winning the whole thing, but here they find themselves. Philadelphia, meanwhile, 20%. And for the directionless Milwaukee Bucks, 25% odds at landing this year's grand prize. A kid from Kansas named Andrew Wiggins. Though, the consolation prize of Jabari Parker did sound pretty good, but not as good as Andrew Wiggins. So, here it all goes. Hopefully for the 19-year-old being called Maple Jordan.
The third pick in this year's draft goes to the Philadelphia 76ers. The second pick will be made by the Milwaukee Bucks. And that means that the number one pick in the 2014 NBA draft goes to the Cleveland Cavaliers.
But if you're gonna get any consolation prize, Jabari Parker sounds like a pretty good one to me. An elite talent being compared to Carmelo Anthony, but with a twist. Carmelo Anthony with much, and I mean much better character. Not only was he a future all-star, but a stable player the Bucks can trust by building a contender around. So when Bucks GM Hammond selected Parker on draft night with the second overall pick, Parker's smooth skill set made one thing clear. Milwaukee had what they've been desperately looking for, a franchise player. He still hadn't played a single game yet, but this was not only one of the best one-and-done prospects ever, but one of the best high school prospects of all time. Parker's ability to score at every level made him an NBA-ready player who could play either forward spot. So drafting Parker created a buzz around Milwaukee headed into 2015. Not to mention a new coach this time around with Jason Kidd after a polarizing first year with the Nets. And with Parker would be a few players who could become nice complements to their new prized possession. The first being Brandon Knight, that one player who scored 1,000 points in 2014. Along with Knight was a 22-year-old named Khris Middleton, a former second-round pick acquired in the same sign-and trade which got them Brandon Knight. Unlike Knight, however, Middleton was in the deal to make the money work for Detroit. In Middleton's second season, though, he went from playing 400 minutes total as a rookie to 30 minutes a night in Milwaukee, averaging a modest but efficient 12 points per game. Then there was Mayo off the bench, who at just 27 was already headed out of the league. And lastly was the team's first-round pick from a year prior in 2013, Giannis Antetokounmpo. Found in Greece, the 19-year-old had a unique skill set and amazing physical tools, but he fell out of the lottery in an awful draft for a reason. He had the upside, but was a project that needed time and patience. Going into the 2014-15 season, however, things didn't go as planned for the Bucks. Jabari Parker wasn't down bad, but he was going through those typical rookie growing pains. Yet, the Bucks were still winning games. Brandon Knight was a borderline all-star, and with the size Milwaukee had on the roster, Jason Kidd's aggressive scheme defensively gave teams trouble. The Bucks were supposed to still be a lottery team, yet were on track to make the playoffs. And bam, less than 2 months in, Jabari Parker tore his ACL. His left one. Just like that, Parker's rookie year was over, and filling his role was Khris Middleton and Giannis Antetokounmpo, the two unknowns, stepping in to help the Bucks win games. On nights where the other guys were floundering, it was Giannis who dominated, while Middleton continued to establish himself out on the perimeter. With their improvement, Milwaukee doubled their 2014 win total by just a trade deadline. Then, bam. Hammond and the Bucks traded their lead guy in Brandon Knight for Michael Carter-Williams, a move that had Jason Kidd's fingerprints all over it. Trading a score-first point guard for a big point guard with size, but couldn't shoot to the slightest degree, and provided more to Kidd's defense, which was predicated on size, length, and athleticism. To close out the season, MCW would have his moments, but the transition from Knight to Carter-Williams made Milwaukee a totally different team, going 11-18 to end the year. Yet, the East that year was so top-heavy, Milwaukee at 41 wins was a 6 seed. In round 1, they found themselves up against the 3-seeded Bulls, another team also trying to find its identity. As many people expect with Chicago's playoff experience, Milwaukee quickly went down 3-0, and with their backs against the wall, managed to squeak out a win in Game 4 and then Game 5 before Chicago tucked them in bed with a 54-point win in Game 6. That night was not one to remember for the Bucks. Zaza Pachulia led the team in scoring with 8 points. So hey, they're 2 games away from the second round without Jabari Parker. Getting him back with Greg Monroe replacing Zaza Pachulia at center, the Bucks were clearly capable of going even further in the playoffs. And they went 33-49. In fact, the Bucks were a better team with Zaza Pachulia at center. Monroe was an awful fit for the Bucks defensively, and by 2016, post-dominant bigs like himself, who once had a good track record, began to fade away. On top of that, for Jabari Parker, not only did he still have to go through those typical rookie growing pains he still hadn't fully experienced yet, but he also had to recover from a torn ACL. The Bucks still had high hopes for Parker though. The pick after him and Joel Embiid still hadn't even played yet, but despite the team taking a step back in 2016, there was something else, a spark. Jason Kidd in early February said, you know what, Michael Carter-Williams stinks, Giannis is our point guard. MCW and Greg Monroe were then moved to the bench, and Giannis quickly leveled up, finishing year 3 in a fashion that made many start to think this might actually be our franchise guy. Middleton, meanwhile, had developed into Milwaukee's leading scorer, an efficient one at that, proving worthy of the 5-year, $70 million deal Milwaukee gave him the offseason previous. And seeing the fruits of their labor, the Bucks decided to shoot their shot in the 2016 draft with yet another project player.
With the 10th pick in the 2016 NBA draft, the Milwaukee Bucks select Thon Maker.
Then the second round selected 4-year Virginia guard Malcolm Brogdon. The big move though was signing Giannis Antetokounmpo to a 4-year, $100 million extension, making total sense. For Giannis, he improved in every area of his game in his first 3 seasons, and as time went on, continued to fill out more and more, growing at least an inch, and that, along with his development in the other areas of his game, showed glimpses of brilliance. But before the 2016-17 season began, 2 more moves were made. For Carter-Williams in 2016, inconsistent play was his forte, so he was relegated to the bench before suffering a hip injury which ended his season. So Milwaukee had to move on, trading him to Chicago for Tony Snell. For Greg Monroe, meanwhile, he would be playing in the second unit from here on out. When the year began, Giannis was everything people could have possibly hoped for. But to start the year, there was one thing which kind of shot them in the leg. A Khris Middleton hamstring injury. Middleton wouldn't play his first game until February. However, very fortunately, during Middleton's absence, Jabari Parker started to put it all together, developing a solid 3-point shot to average 20 points a night. While Giannis was going on a rampage most nights, it was Jabari Parker alongside him who helped create a formidable forward tandem in southeast Wisconsin. That, along with the constant shooting from Tony Snell and Malcolm Brogdon, gave Milwaukee what they desperately needed a year prior. And without Middleton, they again finished the year as the 6th seed, matching up against the 3-seeded Raptors. In Game 1, Giannis was awesome, leading the Bucks to victory on the Raptors' home floor. But even after a Game 1 victory, something felt off, almost like something was missing. The Bucks were starting a rookie Thon Maker in the playoffs. This guy averaged 9 minutes a game all year long, so why are they starting Thon Maker? Remember how Khris Middleton missed the first 4 months of the season? In his return on February 8th, Jabari Parker, again, tore his left ACL, leaving a sour taste for the Bucks in an otherwise encouraging junior season for Parker. Without him, the Bucks had Giannis and Khris Middleton trying to figure himself out, and then an underwhelming supporting cast for playoff standards. So, the Bucks lost in a rough Game 2, but then took Game 3 as DeMar DeRozan and Kyle Lowry were nowhere to be found. Then in Game 4, it was Giannis' turn to play poorly, as DeMar DeRozan went from making 0 shots in Game 3 to a 33-point performance in Game 4. By the time Giannis could come back with a strike of his own, the Raptors had already found their footing and an exit ticket to the second round. For Milwaukee, meanwhile, they yet again lost in 6. 2 months later, Giannis would be voted the league's most improved player, and on that same night, a 22-year-old they found in the second round won the Rookie of the Year. And while Parker's second ACL tear devastated the franchise, all the team now needed was a bit of luck. Good luck, of course. Then a month before the NBA draft, team executive John Hammond left Milwaukee for sunny Orlando. To fill his place, Milwaukee went in-house by hiring the president of basketball operations, John Horst, to be their next general manager. Right after, Horst re-signed Tony Snell, and after the season started, traded away Greg Monroe and a few picks for Eric Bledsoe. Adding Bledsoe into the mix would take some of the pressure off of Giannis as a ball handler and scorer, also adding some much-needed offense in the absence of Jabari Parker. That, along with the expected development of the former most improved player and a healthy Khris Middleton, made one thing for sure. Until otherwise, it was Giannis Antetokounmpo that the Bucks would be building around. When the 2017-18 season season began, Giannis reached the next level. Not an all-star level, a superstar level. The man was averaging nearly 30, 10, and 5, along with great defense, but something else was missing. Not Jabari Parker, though he could help. Wins. So John Horst pulled the plug, firing Jason Kidd. With Kidd, Milwaukee still had the defensive personnel, yet were at the bottom of the league defensively. In fact, the defense hadn't been respectable since Kidd's first year as the team's coach. In 2015, their defense ranked 4th in the league, but after that, it ranked 23rd, 19th, then in 2018, 25th. The team would eventually get Parker back, but sadly, he wasn't the same. To say the least, he was a bad defender, and while he had some moments here and there, he didn't finish the offense the way he had pre-injury. The Bucks would finish just 2 games better than they did in 2017, and this time were just a 7 seed. They matched up against a young Celtics team, which would become a series to remember. In Game 1, Giannis and Middleton combined for 66, with Middleton hitting this shot to send the game to OT. The man was in his bag, and it was at this point Khris Middleton introduced himself on a national scale. On the series, the man averaged 24 a night, shooting over 60% from 3. For Eric Bledsoe, he got dogged by Terry Rozier. After going down 0-2, it was here. The Eric Bledsoe-Terry Rozier beef began. And with no one else in the Bucks showing up, it was Giannis and Khris Middleton versus the Celtics, led to them falling short in Game 7. So it was at this point where 2 eras collided. Initially, the expectation was for Jabari Parker to be the Bucks franchise player, but as his rookie contract went up, it was somebody else taking that throne. No one knew if he would return as a Buck. Then the Bulls swooped in and offered Parker a 2-year, $40 million contract, making the decision pretty easy for Milwaukee. It was time to move on. Now, it was also time to find the right coach. They got that coach in Mike Budenholzer, and it was at this point where the fun really began for Milwaukee.
With the 17th pick in the 2018 NBA Draft, the Milwaukee Bucks select Dante DiVincenzo.
Then signed Brook Lopez and Ersan Ilyasova. They had their coach and the depth they badly needed, and in 2019, the story of the year was the Milwaukee Bucks surge to the top. After hiring Coach Bud, that poorly choreographed Jason Kidd defense shot up to the best defense in the entire NBA, 25th to 1st, a 7th seed to the best record in the NBA. Giannis went from a superstar level in 2018 to a legitimate MVP candidate in 2019, and that quick turnaround obviously made Mike Budenholzer a no-brainer to win Coach of the Year. Their new addition of Brook Lopez showcased his new and shiny 3-point shot, earning the nickname Splash Mountain. It was their first 60-win season since 1981. Most notably, with LeBron James out west watching the playoffs from home, the Eastern Conference was wide open. And to start the postseason, Milwaukee matched up against Detroit in round 1, humiliating the Pistons in their first playoff series win in almost 2 decades. Then in round 2, got the Celtics rematch they badly wanted. But this time, Boston, like Milwaukee, had some reinforcements. In Game 1, Brad Stevens threw all the size the Celtics had at Giannis to stop him from dominating the interior, which worked well. Giannis shot 30% from the field, and the Celtics took Game 1 on Milwaukee's home floor.
I don't know where Milwaukee goes from here because
Whoa. So is this over?
No, listen, I think it's over.
This series is over.
Yeah, they lost.
Game?
The Bucks then matched up against Toronto, a clear underdog who had everything to lose. The Bucks would win both games on their home floor, but when the series returned to Toronto, the Raptors started to figure Milwaukee out, winning the next 2 games on a home floor of their own. Toronto even took a play out of Brad Stevens' playbook. This became known as the Wall. By the time the series was back to Milwaukee, it was too late. The Raptors' defense did an incredible job guarding Giannis. Then off the bench, Fred VanVleet could not miss. The Bucks lost 4 straight games and a ticket to the NBA Finals. Giannis would later be the MVP, so the season was a success, but a letdown, as the Bucks watched the Raptors beat a depleted Golden State Warriors team in the NBA Finals, making one thing clear: this Milwaukee Bucks team is capable of so much more. But it wouldn't be that simple. Most of the players in the rotation outside Giannis were going to be free agents in 2019. Among those that re-signed were Eric Bledsoe, then Khris Middleton, Brook Lopez, and George Hill. As for Malcolm Brogdon, the Pacers offered him a contract the Bucks could not match. Nikola Mirotic would walk into the sunlight of Europe, and to replace them, Milwaukee added Wesley Matthews, Kyle Korver, and Robin Lopez. It was time to run it back. In doing so, the Bucks started 2020 even better, on a 70-win pace until March. This time for Giannis, though, he wasn't a candidate for MVP, but the clear-cut MVP, averaging 30, 14, and 6 while being an integral part to a league-leading defense for a 2nd year in a row. Giannis' emergence even further, along with Khris Middleton averaging 20 points per game on 50, 40, 90, but not part of the 50, 40, 90 club shooting splits, and a league-leading defense defense set Milwaukee up as a safe pick to win the conference. Orlando made some people's hearts skip a beat after beating the Bucks in Game 1, but Milwaukee would turn the card back around, taking care of them in 5 games, which led to round 2, guaranteeing a rematch in the conference finals against either Toronto or Boston. All they had to do was beat Jimmy Butler and the Miami Heat. The Heat, however, embraced the challenge and were well prepared. They had the defensive personnel to limit Giannis and the three-point shooting to score in bunches. By Game 4, the Heat were up 3-0. Giannis went down with an ankle injury, and to many, it seemed like the best team in the league had no pulse. While the season looked all but over for Milwaukee, it was Khris Middleton who was able to brew some of his push-ins together, and the series was going to Game 5. But Giannis wasn't ready to go, and the Bucks without him would be eliminated. The blame for the Bucks collapsing in back-to-back playoff runs was put on 2 people, Mike Budenholzer and Drew Bledsoe. In back-to-back playoff runs, when things didn't go as planned, adjustments need to be made on both ends of the floor for the Bucks. But Milwaukee didn't even attempt to adjust, and in 2 series they should have won, fell short to a team we all believed they were better than. For Eric Bledsoe, in 3 straight playoff runs, he was awful. Hence, changes needed to be made, because that 4-year, $100 million contract Giannis agreed to in the 2016 offseason, that would be up in less than a year. And at this point, where they traded everything away to get Jrue Holiday, the Bucks showed Giannis they will do whatever it takes to put him in the best position to win a title. In the days that followed, Milwaukee signed Bobby Portis, Bryn Forbes, and Torrey Craig. It was time. The 2-time MVP signed a 5-year, $228 million contract extension. The big thing for the Bucks was, as the year went on, they continued to experiment, trying new things to prepare for the playoffs. With Jrue Holiday now at point guard, the Bucks no longer needed to use Giannis as a lead ball handler. And Giannis playing point guard was really the only way opposing defenses could stop him from dominating the interior. Then a month into the season, something else happened. The Nets traded for James Harden. To many, the Bucks not trading for Harden was another missed opportunity. But when the Nets traded for James Harden, it did open up another avenue for Milwaukee, a contender now rebuilding, looking to sell players who could help a team win now. So a few months later, a little bit before the trade deadline, the Bucks shipped DJ Augustin, DJ Wilson, and their own 2023 first for PJ Tucker and their pick in 2022. In other words, the Bucks got PJ Tucker for absolutely nothing. Having Holiday, arguably the best on-ball defender in the NBA, and Tucker, who made a career off his defensive play, the Bucks now had the right defensive personnel to do many things they couldn't previous in the playoffs. And in order to beat the Nets, they needed as many defenders as they could get. The Bucks would finish as just a 3 seed, but the year was generally successful. And going into the playoffs, who did they match up against? The Miami Heat. Yet, even after their meltdown in 2019, the Bucks were still a favorite in round 1. After a rough start to the year, Miami was still trying to find their footing, while Milwaukee already had their foot on the gas. And this time around, it was the Bucks who humiliated the Heat in the series' first 4 games, suffocating Jimmy Butler and the Heat's offense while making them pay with their new improved outside shooting. But now that they had Miami behind them, they had a new and very unique challenge: the Brooklyn Nets. But luckily for Milwaukee, this time, this season, this series had been what they've been preparing for all year. How could it be that the team that comes out of this series alive won't be the last one standing in late July? And in the first minute of Game 1, James Harden left the game with a hamstring injury, which is crazy. For the Bucks, injury fortune being for them, injuries had been the thing that almost sunk the Bucks underwater, and when they recovered, hit them even harder. Yet, even without Harden in Game 1, the Nets were in absolute control. Then in Game 2, they humiliated the Bucks. 2 games into the series, the Nets looked unstoppable without James Harden, so their season depended on Game 3. The Bucks jumped out to a quick lead, leading 30-9, but squandered a once promising lead to Brooklyn. The game then became a low-scoring yet emotion-driven Game 3, having their backs literally against the wall, pulled out a huge win on their home floor. In Game 4, the Bucks were yet again a beneficiary to injury. The Bucks not only won, but tied up a series that initially looked like it could end up in a sweep. Then in the infamous Game 5, best known for the Bucks blowing a 17-point lead to Kevin Durant as he put on a masterclass in James Harden's return, the Bucks yet again found themselves so close to the NBA Finals, but in order to get there, they had to pull off something incredible. So, what would Giannis and Khris Middleton do for that matter? Go off for 68 points combined, forcing the illustrious Game 7 we'd all been looking for. How perfect. A game so perfect it led to overtime. The Bucks won. Those two, stepping up in the biggest moment of their careers, setting Milwaukee up for a conference finals matchup against a blazing hot Atlanta Hawks team. And of course, in typical fashion, the Bucks scare the daylight out of us and then flip the switch. In even more typical fashion, however, the star on the other side, Trae Young, goes down in Game 3 and didn't look right after returning. His injury made their ticket to the NBA Finals seem preordained. The fate of their team, yet again, lies on another injury. The The Hawks would go on to wrap up Game 4 convincingly, but that wasn't the big thing. The big thing was Giannis. As if the Aaron Rodgers saga wasn't enough, another cloud of uncertainty covered the skies of Wisconsin the following morning. Was Khris Middleton, the same way he did against Miami last year in Game 4, going to be able to stir up some of those potions? Wait, what am I even saying? They have Brook Lopez. Going up 3-2, Trae Young would return for Game 6. But with Jrue Holiday and an ankle injury pestering him, the men themselves, headed by Khris Middleton, clinched Milwaukee its first conference title in over 40 years. The last time they were here, the Steelers had just won their first Super Bowl. Waiting on them in the finals was yet another hot, young, and uber competitive team in the Phoenix Suns. Would Giannis be back in time to give the Bucks a chance? Supposedly. Giannis licked himself early on, but reverted back to human form in the second half. But going into Game 2, Giannis would explode for 42. However, the rest of the team just didn't show up. 2-0 Suns. In Game 3, Giannis dropped to only 41 this time, but Jrue Holiday put Devin Booker in prison, and they got good energy and shooting from the rest of the cast. In Game 4, D-Book returned back to form, but a Khris Middleton 40-point game and no one else in Phoenix showing up led to Milwaukee tying this thing up 2-2. Then, come Game 5, the Jrue Holiday game. The Bucks' big three came to play, and Pat Connaughton too was awesome off the bench. The Bucks had won 3 straight, one win away from that title they'd been craving for half a century. In Game 6, as you'd expect, Giannis, for what felt like the 5th night in a row, put DeAndre Ayton in foul trouble and went to work. The Bucks jumped out to a quick lead, but were outscored by 18 in the second quarter. But as the Giannis-DeAndre Ayton matchup started to resemble Shaq versus Rick Smits in the 2000 finals, the Bucks again took back the momentum at home. By the end of the third, Giannis had nearly 40 while his teammates were playing stellar defense. Giannis knocked down the glorious 50 ball. After years of joy, leading to injury and disappointment and ultimately disarray, the Milwaukee Bucks started to celebrate. And a half a century later, the long wait now officially over. And those two youngbloods who originated on a 15-win ball club, the two who apparently once hated each other, found themselves celebrating at the top of a pretty special mountain.